Hi there, BookTube! My name is Christina and today I'm here with the fourth episode in this short kind of guide to how you may learn to read in a different language. This is just a couple of suggestions that I have for you coming from my personal experience, and I hope that they will be useful for you and your experience too. Sorry for the changing light, it's like sunset, but the sun keeps appearing and disappearing at random, so we will have to deal with it. Today, in this fourth episode, I just would love to discuss with you about how to choose an actual book in a foreign language. So what kind of genre you may approach while you're starting to read in a foreign language for the first time. In this episode, I decided to, let's say, analyze three main possible genres. There are a lot more, of course. I will just go with the ones that I'm most familiar with and with the ones that I was taking into account when I was starting to read in a different language. So the first category is classics. A lot of people actually approach a language because of their love for the classics in that language. For example, I have a bunch of students who told me in the past that they decided to learn Russian because they were passionate about Tolstoy or Dostoevsky and they just wanted to read in Russian. So that's usually one of the reasons why people start to learn a language. And that's pretty amazing. On the other side, it's a little bit frightening because as a teacher you know that they will require a lot of time to be able and to have the necessary skills to read Tolstoy or Dostoevsky in Russian. But that will be up to them. I'm just an instrument that they use. I'm a teacher, so I'm just there to help them to reach their goals. So the classics are usually the first thing that a lot of people take into account. If you are willing to go with a classic, there are pros and cons. Of course, the cons is that usually a classic has been written a while ago, so the language probably is a bit different from the one that people are using and that you are currently learning. Like, for example, the classics of Italian literature, the very old ones, they are written in a completely different language from the one that we're using right now. Or, for example, people who are learning English just to read Shakespeare, it will take a while for them to learn how to read Shakespeare because he's not using the same language, the exact same language, with the same structures that we are used to use in our everyday life. So this is definitely a cons. So the language of the classics may be a bit difficult to grasp and to understand. But a pro actually can be that the classics, being classics, have been written and rewritten and published and republished, and almost every country knows and tries to give as much resonance as possible to its classics, and this means that a lot of classics have been just shortened and kind of rewritten in a little bit more of a simpler language just for learners. So maybe you won't be able to read a full book, a full classic, but you will still be able to read the story in a scholastic version of it. So, for example, when I was learning English, when I was young and I was going in high school, we had a bunch of books that had a scholastic version. So some classics were just abridged and a little bit modified, and they had some more notes at the end of the page with the explanations of some of the words and some of the grammar structures. So that's very useful with classics because, as I said before, classics are the ones that draw so much people to a language. So publishers know that and they're trying to just meet our needs. So classics can be very useful or a little bit frightening at the beginning, but it's up to you. If you're loving classics, why not to try? You may try with the entry level and just then go all the way up till the moment when you will be able to read all the huge chunker in the original language. The second category, that genre, let's say it's not a genre, it's just a category that I would love to talk about, is modern. What do I mean by modern? It could be contemporary, it could be a little bit less than contemporary, but always in that kind of field, and it can be whatever kind of genre. It can be just a plain contemporary, a young adult, or it can be, I don't know, magic realism, something like that. There we have again pros and cons. The pro here is that it's definitely easier to grasp the meaning because we're familiar with the context, with the environment in which the book is set, and we're familiar with the kind of elements like, for example, internet or phones, and we have some added knowledge that helps us to get through the book. But on the other side, something that can become tricky and difficult is actually if the book is too contemporary, like for example young adults or some of the modern just adult books. They can become tricky if they have in there some kind of slang or the language that young people use frequently. Like for example the ways we use to shorten some words like by the way, or oh my god, and so on and so on. Just need to keep in mind that maybe a book will have a little bit of slang or a little bit of unfamiliar language for you, because when you learn the language, you learn the most classic version of it. Of course, you won't learn how people are talking in the streets as a beginner. Maybe as an advanced reader and learner you will, but at the beginning you will just have to keep in mind that it's possible to meet some unfamiliar terms, and to just keep in mind that you will have to go out there and search for the meaning of some words, even if you're picking a modern kind of book. And the third category, because it's me and I cannot just exclude it, it's fantasy. Reading fantasy, it's something very particular for people who are passionate about it. Because when you learn a different language, if you are passionate about fantasy, the first thing that you will be willing to do will be to read a fantasy in that language. And here again we have pros and cons. The huge pro is that if you pick the normal kind of fantasy, let's say, so just the standard kind of fantasy, then you will probably be familiar with a lot of things, like for example the elves or the dwarves, or some of the usual ways of setting a magical system or a kingdom or stuff like that. So you're already very familiar with the structure and dragons and so on and so on and so on. So this helps. If you know already the structure, then it helps to just focus only on the language and on the parts that are missing. But a cons can be the fact that fantasy, being fantasy, usually doesn't like to be too still and too normal, let's say, too standard. There are a lot of fantasies out there that are out there in order to be innovative and to put on the table something completely different, like for example new races, new kinds of magic, new kinds of languages, and so on and so on. So if you're reading a fantasy in a foreign language, then you need to keep in mind that maybe there will be words that you won't be able to understand because they are completely made up and completely invented, and maybe they can have a meaning for the person who is fluent in that language because they have some kind of a similar sound to an existing word actually. But for you they will have no meaning, or maybe they are completely made up words, so you will lose a bit of time in trying to figure out what does it mean, and then you will just understand that it's completely out of the fantasy of the author, so it has no meaning and you just need to imagine it as it is. So this is again a pro and cons that you may see in reading this kind of genre. So these are the three categories or genres that I decided to analyze for the purpose of this episode, but if you're interested in seeing more or knowing something more, then of course comment down below and let me know. I will link down below the first and the second episode and the third one too, and the next one will be the last episode for this short series. I hope that you are enjoying it, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye! Ciao!